how to make the avoidant anxious. You ever wonder why some people run when things get deep? Why they pull away when you get too close? Maybe you've chased after someone who keeps you at arm's length, waiting for them to finally open up. But here's the truth. If you really want to shift the dynamic, you don't beg, you don't chase. You become the one they can't stop thinking about. Today, I'm going to show you how to flip the script and turn the table. The person who sets the frame controls the relationship. If you're always the one reaching out, waiting for them to respond, hoping they'll give you just a little more, stop. You're feeding their avoidant tendencies. Instead, shift your focus inward, build a life so magnetic that they start to wonder what you're up to. People crave what they can't have. The avoidant pushes away because they fear being consumed by the relationship. But what happens when you pull back first? When you create space, that's when they start to feel the void. Not in a manipulative way, just enough to make them realize your presence isn't guaranteed. Certainty is comforting, but uncertainty is addictive. If someone knows you're always available, they take it for granted. When they feel a little uncertainty, when they can't predict your next move, they start to think about you more. A little unpredictability triggers curiosity, and curiosity is the beginning of desire. Avoidance, fear, engulfment, but deep down they still crave connection. So when they do open up, don't smother them. Give them space, then surprise them with moments of deep emotional connection, on your terms. This contrast keeps them engaged and wondering what's next. The person who sets the frame controls the relationship. If you're always the one reaching out, waiting for their response and hoping for their approval, you've already lost control. The avoidant operates in a way that makes you feel like you're always on edge, always chasing, always wondering where you stand. That feeling of uncertainty keeps you hooked. But here's the reality. When you take control of the frame, you flip the script. You stop playing by their rules and start setting the tone yourself. Most people don't realize that the power dynamic in relationships isn't just about who loves who more, it's about who is more certain. Certainty is magnetic. The avoidant thrives on creating distance because it puts them in control. They pull away and you lean in. They ignore and you overthink. They disappear and you analyze what you did wrong. But what happens when you stop reacting, when you stop letting their behavior dictate your emotions? That's when you regain control. Taking control of the frame starts with one thing, shifting your focus inward. Instead of obsessing over how they feel about you, you need to start living in a way that makes them wonder how you feel about them. When you are constantly worried about their emotions, their actions, and their commitment level, you become predictable. Predictability is comfortable, but it's not attractive. What keeps people engaged is a sense of curiosity, a feeling that they don't quite have you figured out. When someone feels like they have complete access to you at all times, they start taking you for granted. But when they feel like they might be losing you, that's when the fear of loss kicks in. So how do you create this shift? First, you stop being available at their convenience. Now, this doesn't mean playing games or being manipulative. It means genuinely filling your life with so much passion, purpose, and fulfillment that they are no longer the center of your emotional world. You stop waiting for their texts and start immersing yourself in experiences that excite you. You stop rearranging your schedule to accommodate them and start prioritizing your own growth and happiness. When your energy shifts, they feel it. They notice when you're no longer waiting around. And that change alone can create anxiety in an avoidant person because it disrupts their sense of control. Another key part of controlling the frame is setting standards. Most people are so afraid of losing someone that they tolerate behavior they would never accept otherwise. They lower their standards, hoping that by being more accommodating, they will finally get the love and validation they crave. But the truth is, the more you tolerate inconsistency, the more you reinforce it. If someone knows they can pull away, ignore you, and come back whenever they want without consequences, they will never change their behavior. But the moment you set a standard and stick to it, everything shifts. You stop engaging in one-sided efforts. You stop accepting breadcrumb communication. You stop making excuses for why they won't commit. And when they realize that you're no longer playing their game, they feel that anxiety creep in. Controlling the frame is also about emotional mastery. The avoiding person often triggers an anxious response in you, making you feel like you need to chase them for reassurance. But when you master your emotions, when you learn to self-soothe instead of seeking validation, you become untouchable. They no longer have power over you because you're not reacting to their pullbacks. Instead, you maintain your sense of calm, confidence, and self-worth regardless of their actions. And that is incredibly powerful. When you control the frame, you're no longer at the mercy of their avoidant patterns. You create an energy that pulls them in rather than pushes them away. You stop chasing and start attracting. You shift from being the person who waits to the person who is pursued. And when you make that shift, you'll see how quickly the dynamic changes. People crave what they can't have. It's a fundamental part of human nature. The moment something feels too easy, too available, or too predictable, it loses value. The avoidant personality type thrives on distance. They push away when things get too close, not because they don't want connection, but because they fear being consumed by it. The natural reaction for someone who is anxiously attached is to chase, to close the gap, to seek reassurance, but that only fuels the avoidance instinct to withdraw even further. The key to shifting this dynamic is understanding and mastering the push-pull effect. Pushing and pulling isn't about manipulation, it's about balance. It's about learning how to give someone enough space to feel safe while simultaneously keeping them emotionally engaged. The mistake most people make with avoidance is leaning in too much when the other person is pulling away. This creates an unhealthy cycle where the avoidant feels overwhelmed and the anxious person feels abandoned. The more the anxious person pushes, the more the avoidant retreats. But what happens when you disrupt that pattern? What happens when you pull back before they do? The moment you stop chasing, something interesting happens. The avoidant starts to feel the absence. The space they once craved suddenly feels empty. They're used to being the ones who dictate the rhythm of the relationship, when to engage, when to retreat. But when you shift the energy and become the one who creates distance, their dynamic is thrown off balance. They begin to feel the discomfort of uncertainty, the same discomfort you once felt when they were pulling away from you. This shift in energy is crucial because it forces them to experience the other side of the equation. When you pull back, you create an emotional vacuum. Nature hates a vacuum, and so does human psychology. When something that was once present disappears or becomes less accessible, the mind starts to focus on it more. Suddenly, the avoidance starts wondering about you. Where did you go? Why aren't you reaching out? Have you lost interest? That curiosity plants a seed of anxiety, which ironically is the exact feeling they used to make you experience. To master the push-pull dynamic, you have to be willing to hold your ground. This means resisting the urge to fill the silence when they pull away. It means not reaching out immediately when they become distant. It means allowing them to sit with their own emotions instead of always being the one to repair the connection. This is hard, especially for someone who craves closeness, but it's essential if you want to shift the power dynamic. It's also important to be intentional about when you push and when you pull. If you disappear entirely, the avoidant may just assume you've moved on and they won't feel the need to re-engage. But if you mix moments of warmth and connection with periods of distance, you create a rhythm that keeps them engaged. When you're present, be fully present. Give them your attention, create meaningful moments, and make them feel valued. But then, without warning, step back. Let them process. Let them feel the shift. This contrast is what makes them start chasing you. Another key to mastering this dynamic is maintaining a life that is bigger than the relationship. The reason many people struggle with push-pull is that they make the relationship their primary focus. But when you're genuinely engaged in your own life, your passions, your goals, your social circle, you naturally create an air of unpredictability. You're not always available because you have things going on. You don't drop everything when they text because you have a purpose beyond them. This isn't an act, it's a mindset. And when you truly embody it, the avoidance starts to feel something unfamiliar, the fear of losing you. Mastering push-pull isn't about playing games, it's about breaking unhealthy cycles. It's about creating an energy of attraction rather than desperation. When you stop over-pursuing and start creating space, you give the avoidant a chance to step forward. You shift the energy from chasing to attracting, and that's when everything changes. Certainty is comforting, but uncertainty is addictive. The human mind is wired to seek out what it cannot predict fully. This is why people become obsessed with things that create emotional highs and lows. Whether it's a thrilling movie, an unpredictable game, or a person whose next move is hard to anticipate, the avoidant thrives in relationships where they have full control over the dynamic. They instinctively know that by keeping their partner guessing, they maintain power. But what happens when you become the source of uncertainty instead? That's when the avoidance starts to experience a shift in their emotional state. Most people make the mistake of offering too much certainty in an attempt to create security. They think that if they are always available, always expressing their feelings, and always reassuring the avoidant, then eventually the avoidant will feel safe enough to let their guard down. But that's not how it works. The avoidant is not drawn to consistency. They are drawn to the unknown. The more certain they feel about you, the more they take you for granted. The less they have to wonder about what you're thinking, the less engaged they become. So how do you leverage uncertainty in a way that makes the avoidant anxious in a good way, and intrigued, curious, and emotionally engaged way? First, you need to disrupt patterns. If you always text first, stop. If you always respond immediately, delay your response. If you always initiate plans, take a step back and let them take the lead. The key is not to become distant, but to create just enough unpredictability that they begin to wonder what's changed. That wondering is what creates emotional investment. Uncertainty is powerful because it forces the mind to seek resolution. When someone is used to getting a predictable response, their brain stops actively thinking about that person. But when the response pattern changes, the brain suddenly starts paying attention again. If an avoidant expects you to reach out at a certain time and you don't, their mind starts asking questions. If they are used to you always being enthusiastic and engaged, and suddenly you are slightly more reserved, they start noticing the difference. This shift in their attention is what makes them start thinking about you in a way they didn't before. It's important to remember that creating uncertainty doesn't mean playing games. You're not trying to manipulate or punish them. You're simply changing your behavior to reflect your own self-worth. When you are no longer 100% predictable, you naturally become more intriguing. This means focusing on your own life, prioritizing your own passions, and becoming someone who is not fully accessible at all times. The more you genuinely enjoy your own life, the more naturally you will exude the kind of unpredictability that draws people in. Another way to create uncertainty is to mix signals of warmth with a little bit of distance. When you do engage, be fully present. Make the moments together meaningful and emotionally rich. Then, at times, pull back slightly. This contrast, deep connection followed by a little space, keeps the avoidant on their toes, prevents them from falling into the pattern of feeling too secure in their ability to control the relationship dynamic. They begin to feel a small amount of the same anxiety they used to make you feel, and that anxiety makes them pay attention. People don't value what they are certain they will always have. This is why people often realize what they had only after they feel like they might lose it. By creating just enough uncertainty, you awaken that part of the avoidant that fears losing something valuable. You make them invest in the connection rather than simply feeling like they can pull away whenever they want without consequence. And once they start investing, their entire emotional dynamic toward you begins to shift. Avoidants struggle with deep emotional connection because they associate intimacy with a loss of independence. Their instinct is to create distance the moment they feel overwhelmed, which can leave their partners feeling rejected or confused. However, at their core, avoidants still crave connection. They just fear the consequences of fully embracing it. The key to making an avoidant anxious in a way that pulls them toward you is to first make them feel safe and then disrupt the pattern they are used to. Creating safety means understanding that an avoidant does not respond well to pressure. When they feel like they are being pushed into emotional closeness, they retreat. This means that if you want them to feel drawn to you, you need to provide moments of connection without forcing them. Let them open up at their own pace when they do share something meaningful. Don't react with overwhelming emotion or demand even more from them. Instead, acknowledge what they shared and let it settle. The more they associate you with a sense of emotional safety, the more they will seek out that connection on their own. But here's where the shift happens. You cannot let the relationship fall into a predictable routine where you are always the emotionally available one and they are always the distant one. Once they start feeling too secure in the idea that you will always be there waiting for them, they stop putting in effort. This is when you need to disrupt the pattern. If you are always available to comfort them, pull back just a little. If you are always the one initiating deep conversations, let silence sit for a while and let them come to you. If they have grown used to you always being the one to accommodate their need for space, change things up by setting your own boundaries. When they start seeing that your presence is not guaranteed, it creates a shift in their mindset. Suddenly, they begin to feel the uncertainty they used to avoid. But this disruption isn't about punishing them or playing mind games. It's about balance. If an avoidant always knows they can pull away and you will still be there, they won't feel a need to engage differently. But if they start sensing that they could actually lose your attention, they become more emotionally invested. At first, they may resist or test the boundaries, but if you remain firm in your newfound balance of warmth and distance, they will adjust. Instead of taking your presence for granted, they will start to experience a low level of anxiety about losing you. This subtle but powerful shift is what compels them to engage more deeply. By mastering this combination of safety and disruption, you make yourself someone they can't fully predict. That unpredictability combined with a genuine sense of connection is what keeps an avoidant emotionally engaged and more invested in the relationship over time. The moment you stop seeking validation from an avoidant and start focusing on yourself, everything changes. Most people make the mistake of putting the avoidant on a pedestal, constantly trying to prove their worth, win their affection, or convince them to stay. But the real power lies in becoming the prize, the person they feel lucky to have, the one they fear losing. This shift in mindset is what ultimately makes the avoidant anxious in a way that draws them toward you rather than pushing them away. Being the prize means recognizing your own value. It means no longer tolerating inconsistent behavior or accepting breadcrumbs of affection. When you truly embody self-worth, You no longer feel desperate for their attention because you understand that you bring something valuable to the table. You don't beg for love, you don't chase after someone who keeps pulling away, and you certainly don't allow yourself to be in a relationship where your needs are constantly minimized. Instead, you live in a way that naturally makes people want to be around you, not because you're trying to manipulate them, but because you exude confidence and purpose. One of the most attractive qualities a person can have is a strong sense of self. When you stop making the avoidant the center of your emotional world and start prioritizing your own happiness, you become infinitely more desirable. The avoidant is used to people chasing them, bending over backward to accommodate their fears of intimacy. But when they meet someone who isn't willing to do that, someone who maintains high standards and walks away from inconsistency, it disrupts their usual pattern. They start feeling something they aren't used to: uncertainty. And uncertainty makes people pay attention. A huge part of becoming the prize is having an exciting, fulfilling life outside of the relationship. People who are overly focused on a single person for their emotional fulfillment tend to become predictable, and predictability can lead to being taken for granted. But when you are engaged in your own passions, pursuing your goals, and living with a sense of adventure, you become someone that others naturally gravitate toward. You are not just a partner, you are an experience, a source of energy that brings something unique into their life. This doesn't mean you should be distant or cold. Quite the opposite. You should be warm, engaging, and full of life. But you should also be selective about who gets access to you. The avoidant needs to feel that your presence is something special, something that isn't guaranteed. The moment they start believing they could lose you, they begin to value you more. This isn't about playing games, it's about maintaining self-respect. When you fully step into this mindset, you naturally create a sense of scarcity. The avoidant starts to realize that if they don't step up, they might lose you to someone else who recognizes your worth. This triggers a subtle but powerful form of anxiety, the fear of missing out on something truly valuable. And that fear is what makes them start to invest in the relationship in a way they never have before. By becoming the prize, you flip the dynamic. Instead of being the one who constantly worries about losing them, they become the one who starts worrying about losing you. And once that shift happens, everything changes. At the end of the day, the key to shifting any relationship dynamic, especially with an avoidant person, is about reclaiming your own power. It's not about manipulation, games, or forcing someone to change. It's about understanding human psychology and creating an environment where they feel drawn to you instead of constantly pulling away. When you control the frame, master the push-pull dynamic, introduce just the right amount of uncertainty, create balance between safety and disruption, and most importantly, become the prize, you stop chasing and start attracting. You create a shift where the avoidant begins to feel the kind of anxiety they once made you feel, the fear of losing something valuable. But here's the real secret. This isn't just about them. This is about you stepping into your full potential, recognizing your own worth, and refusing to settle for less than what you deserve. Because when you embody confidence, when you radiate purpose, and when you live life on your own terms, you don't just make the avoidant anxious, you make them realize that you are someone they can't afford to lose. And whether they step up or not, that's not the point. The point is, by implementing these shifts, you'll no longer tolerate relationships that drain you. You'll attract people who are truly ready for the kind of deep connection you deserve. And that is real power. Thank you for being here today and for investing in yourself. The fact that you're willing to learn, grow, and evolve means that you are already on the path to becoming the most powerful, magnetic version of yourself. Remember, you are not here to beg for love, to chase someone who won't meet you halfway, or to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's emotional limitations. You are here to live boldly, love deeply, and stand in your worth. I appreciate your time, your energy, and your commitment to creating the kind of relationships that truly fulfill you. Now go out there and own your power. Thank you.